Welcome, everyone, to Breakthrough with MediaU, our almost every 2 week series where we talk with significant people who have had great careers, are having great careers in film, television, media, and we do 30-minute accelerated mentoring sessions with them. Our guest today is a pretty extraordinary person, Steve Tao, Senior Executive at the CW Network. Steve has been responsible for and has supervised multiple shows that you know, including shows that are on the air right now, like All American, now in its fifth season, All American Homecoming, now in its third season. It's now in its second season, and Kung Fu, which is in its third season and is the only all Asian show on network television. Um, Steve, hi, great to see you.
Great to see you, Adam.
And Steve, before we get into this, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know that you're about to go out of town tomorrow, so we're grabbing this moment. Before we get into this, can you just tell us what exactly it is that you do? Because I know that your job is mystifying to many people unless they've actually been inside a network or have actually been running a show on a network and have worked with someone like you.
Sure, it's a very mystifying kind of job, but I am what is called a television executive. Now, you've heard of producers and directors and writers. They all need to be overseen by people. And usually it's an executive producer on a show, but the show is on usually a network or a streaming service. And there is somebody at that network or streaming service who is overseeing the show. In that case, it's a current executive, and that is what I do. I am a current executive. I work on multiple shows that are currently on the air. I oversee all of the creative materials, whether it be a story or a script, an outline, or a rough cut, and I give notes to make the show as good as humanly possible. Studios have the same kinds of executives. If you know this classic movie Network, this is where I got my original inspiration. When I was a very young child, probably way too young, my mother took me to see this movie called Network. It was written by a guy named Patty Chayefsky, and it was such an inspiration to me. I still have the script in old classic format today, but it was a show in which Faye Dunaway played a network executive, and she was coming up with ideas for television shows. She was figuring out where to put them on the schedule, and a lot of people were scared of her character. And I, being a very impressionable but very determined kid, I was actually inspired by her character, and I said, "That's what I wanted to do," and that is what my singular goal has been really since I was a young child, to come to LA to break into the TV business, and I did, and I'm here still.
That's amazing. So I have a couple questions to come off of that before we get to mentoring. The first
Sure.
is, are people scared of you?
I try not to have people be scared of me, only when I need them to be.
And you know, how many shows are you running right now?
I'm currently running 5 shows. So I've got the 2 All-American shows, Kung Fu. I've got a new show coming out called Gotham Knights, which is set in the Batman Gotham world. And I've got a show called The Winchesters, which is a prequel show to the original show, Supernatural, which ran on the CW for 15 years.
So that seems to me like an extraordinary burden on you, just in terms of the volume of scripts that will be coming in, and you have to read and give notes on every script, right?
Yeah, I'd actually have to read and give notes on every step of the way. So, generally speaking, on every episode that we air, I'll get a story first, and that story will give me a general sense of the plot of the episode. But it will also, more importantly, give me the sense of where the characters are heading. You always want to start a character in one emotional place, have them go through an emotional journey in the episode, and then land at a different emotional place at the end of the episode. So, my job is to make sure I understand what the emotional journeys are for each of the characters, and then to make sure that the plot makes sense. And that's from I read a story, which could be about 3 to 8 pages. I'll read an outline at the next step, which will be somewhere around 15 to 20 pages, and then I'll finally get a script, which will be about 50 pages long. So each episode has about 3 different written steps involved before a piece of footage is even shot.
Wow. And do you give your notes in a meeting on a Zoom? Do you write them? Do you text them? Do you send them by WhatsApp? How do you actually convey the notes on a show?
It's a great question. I would say for a new show, which will generally need a little bit more help and a little bit more work, we will talk with the showrunners on a phone call. Generally, we don't do Zoom calls because you're really focused on reading the notes in a script, your notes in a script, and the producer's trying to figure out the notes in while he or she is reading the script. So usually the notes calls are done over the phone. When a show is really well run, I can usually get those across in a text message or an email. With the pandemic, when we all went home, and schedules got kind of crazy. Texting and emailing became much more prevalent.
Amazing. All right. Well, let's get into mentoring. The purpose of Breakthrough with Media U is to provide key mentoring tips and guidance for people who are interested in any part of the media industry. Today, we're going to focus on television primarily. I've been mentored to get to the career that I have. Steve, you've been mentored to get to the career that you have, and this is our opportunity to pay it forward. Steve, if we were to think about when somebody is considering how they want initially to present themselves, perhaps to be hired for a job, uh, anywhere in the TV ecosystem. What's one of the most important things that they can do for themselves and how they present themselves?
It's a great question because when you go in to meet a potential employer or you're meeting somebody who is possibly could be a mentor to you, you need to tell your personal story. They want to get to know you, and you want to be able to tell a story that is compelling, that kind of explains that you are a great storyteller, and also makes you the most important person that person has met in a long time. You want to distinguish yourself and you want to tell a very clear personal story. I like to tell my personal story, which I do with prospective employers or with people who come to meet with me. I am a middle class kid. My father was an immigrant from China. My mother, full Chinese, was born in Arkansas. So I was raised as a Chinese American kid, and I was fed a diet of pop culture. I watched TV shows with my mom. I went to the movies every weekend with my dad. I listened to the radio and I knew top 40. I was a product of pop culture. And when I came to Hollywood, I used that background of mine to make sure people knew that despite my face not looking the most Caucasian American, I was as American as anybody else, and I could rattle off the top 10 network shows, the top box office grossers of that week, or the top songs on the radio, because I wanted people to know who I was. I didn't know anybody in Hollywood. I wasn't related to anybody in Hollywood. I didn't sleep with anybody to get into Hollywood, so I had to make it on my own. So as a result, I went about and I researched everywhere I could to find an opportunity. And the first and best opportunity I found was at Walt Disney Studios, where I met our moderator today, Adam Leipzig. We had a great first meeting, and I pitched myself. And I eventually, after about 10 interviews, got hired at Disney. And that was my entry into Hollywood. So when you look at my personal story, I give you some background on who I am. I am a kid from a middle class background. I am Chinese American, and I am a product of pop culture. It's important for me to say that because I want people to know that that is going to make me a good mainstream television executive. I talk about my obstacles. Like I didn't know anybody in Hollywood. I wasn't related. I had no connections in Hollywood. And then I talk about how I overcame those obstacles by doing research. And I called everybody in town. And then I finished my story with a victory. And my victory was I got an interview at Disney and I got a job. So I tell a beginning, middle, and end. I give a little bit of backstory. I give a little bit of context. But my whole idea when I am telling my personal story is to let people know that I am my background, my taste will make me a great executive.
Okay, this is one of the reasons that I'm so glad that we record these breakthroughs for later reviewing and rewatching, because if you rewind for a couple of minutes and you just go back to Steve's personal story, He did all of that in about 60 seconds. It's
Exactly.
really worth watching again to see how masterfully you did it and how concise you can be and do all those things yourself, your identity, your background, why you're perfect for the job, uh, how you had challenges, how you had obstacles, how you overcame them, and how you had a victory,
Because
all in
people
60
love a
seconds.
victory. They love a victory. So you want to tell a story. You want to craft your own. You want to put yourself as the protagonist of your own story. And the reason I do it in such a concise manner is, people have a very short attention span, and frankly, you have about 3 minutes to make your first impression. And if you don't make your first impression in that 3 minutes, people are going to start thinking about, oh, I've got to go do my laundry. I've got to go to the store to buy groceries. Their mind's going to wander. So you really have to try to get that story down in a minute or two. And you will adjust your personal story depending on who you're meeting. If you're definitely going in for an interview, you're going to want to give a little bit more detail because they're going to want to know who you are. If you're meeting somebody at a cocktail party, you have a minute. That's about it because they're going to look at who next to talk to. But as you do this more and more, it will become very natural to you. You won't even have to think about your story. It'll just come naturally, and then you can focus on the rest of your meeting.
One of the things that you just did, and that you also just mentioned, is that you're going to be asked to tell your personal story over and over and over again in a job interview, or even not in a job interview. You're just bumping into somebody and you're having coffee with them, uh, and it's a story that you should be prepared to tell. In every job interview, at some point, or there's after the discussion about, oh, how's the weather, or how's COVID this week, or what's traffic like, somebody says something like, "So tell me about yourself." That is the invitation to tell your personal story, and you should be prepared for it. And your first words shouldn't be, so You should be just like, go right in, vertical takeoff, and jump into it like you just did.
Exactly. And I wouldn't do a list of things on your resume. That's not a story. That's a list of things on your resume. When you tell your personal story, you are putting yourself out there. You want the person to know who you are. The way in which you tell your story will sort of illuminate your personality, but your story, the way you tell your story, will also reflect on how good a storyteller you are. And that's one of the most important things that you can get across without telling somebody, I'm a good storyteller. Be a
Just by
good storyteller in your
Yeah,
story.
just by doing it, just by doing it. Okay, so now let's go to the next level of this. You're telling your personal story. You're in this situation. But you also have to know what makes you unique, what makes you stand out, why you instead of somebody else. Can you give some mentoring around how people can identify those things and then express them?
Yes, every single one of us has a unique background, and it's up to you to figure out what is that unique background that makes you interesting, makes you want to tell stories. The fact that I am Chinese American does not make me unique. There are a lot of Chinese Americans out there, but the fact that I knew the top 10 rated TV shows, the top box office movies, or the top songs on the radio, that makes me a little bit different. The fact that my mother is from Arkansas and she's full Chinese, that has actually caused led into a lot of conversations. Um, find the elements about yourself that make you uniquely interesting. And if you're going in for a job, let's say you're going to go in as a writer on a medical show, what is it about your background that makes you interesting for the medical show? Think about, if you're going in for an interview, what that person is looking for, and try to find something in your background that might make that person say, "Oh, you'd be great for my show." In fact, just yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an attorney and who wants to be a writer, and she wants to become a writer on a legal show, and her way in is to talk about all of her experience as a lawyer. And that is, there are a lot of lawyers out there who want to write, but that gives her one leg up over everybody else. And when you think about going in for a meeting with an executive or with an agent or manager or a producer, you've got to also put yourself into their shoes. They're meeting a lot of people. They could be in a typical season where I am looking for writers on staff on my shows. I could be meeting 30 to 40 writers a week. And it's very easy to get forgotten in that for one week. So I'm looking for the pieces of somebody's life, of somebody's personal story that will stand out to make them interesting and make them memorable. So not only are you trying to make yourself memorable, you're also trying to stand out amongst everybody else that person might have been meeting that week or even that month or that year. I just worked with a director I met with 2 years ago, and she told me something so interesting about her life. I've remembered her for 2 years, and I've been trying to get her on a show, and I finally was able to do so. But because she was able to come up with something uniquely interesting and made her uniquely qualified for the show, it helped get her a job.
That's fantastic. That whatever she did with you, whatever she said with you in what was probably a very short meeting,
Mhm.
so sticky, you held on to it for 2 years. You remembered her to be able to then help her with her career and help the show get better because they were going to have her.
And she did an excellent job. I knew she was talented. I knew she was going to do a great job, and I just kept pushing for her because she had such a great background, and she told me about it. All of you guys will have great backgrounds. You just figure out what is it that makes you uniquely qualified for a job.
I want to do a little sidebar for a moment on diversity,
Sure.
if we may,
Absolutely.
because one of the thing you are one of the few diverse executives in television. You have been one of the few diverse senior executives in movies and television for a long time. One of the things that you just said in your personal story was that you had to explain that even though your face doesn't look Caucasian, you understand pop culture. And I wonder if how you think about that today. A lot of the people who have come to MediaU are coming to MediaU are diverse, are looking for opening the doors of access, finding pathways where there are not a lot of people who have faces that look like theirs.
Hmm.
Can you talk about how these participants, these community members in MediaU, can position themselves in a good way uh, to address that, and in a way that's also authentic to our time, our moment, and to themselves.
Absolutely. I think I have this conversation with people every week. Um, you're the one thing you have to be when you are going into meetings is you have to be your authentic self. You have to be who you are, whether it is a racial background, whether it's a sexual identity background, whether it's an economic background. You have to be authentic. I think there is a the door has opened a little bit. It hasn't swung wide open for diversity, but this is the time for diverse talent to find jobs. The door is cracking open, and as we see more and more diverse talent get jobs and succeed, it proves to people in chairs like mine that there are other people who can do these jobs. So it is really, oftentimes it's opening the doors. Oftentimes it's like breaking open the doors once they've kind of cracked open. It's a great moment, but that you also have to understand that you will not necessarily look like the other person who is making the decision. You have to make that person comfortable with you to hire you. So that is where I don't consider that compromising. I consider that finding what is true about yourself and presenting that as your strength to the person who is hiring you. Um, I would never ask anybody to not be who they are. And I think when you find yourself in that situation, it may not be the right place to be. There are great places in Hollywood now, really looking to be more diverse, more open, and there are a lot of places that aren't. So I would say that if one door closes, there's always another door that can open up.
And there are actually a lot more doors today than there were 5 years, 10 years ago.
Yeah, actually, that's for darn sure. Because when I first started, I think was I the only diverse executive at Disney at the time? I think I was the
You were
only
for a
one.
while, yes. And
Yeah, and now in my department, we have a black executive, we have a gay, two gay executives, and we're a team of five. So we're pretty diverse, and this company really seeks diversity. You know, in God's honest truth, oftentimes people of color or people from diverse backgrounds are less expensive because they have less experience. So, when I took my job at Disney with Adam, I was making I possibly could have been making less than minimum wage, but I knew that if I got in there and showed what I could do, I would stick around and I would succeed. And you do have to try a little bit harder. It is an unfortunate truth, but because oftentimes people think they're giving you a chance as opposed to thinking that they're hiring the best person for the job, you have to not only do the job, but you have to do a little bit more. You have to stay a little bit longer. You have to do a little bit more work. It's not necessarily fair, but it is a fact of life sometimes. And those who do succeed really do succeed.
I think we're going to do a whole special breakthrough just on that topic.
It's a good topic to
It's a
discuss.
good one. It's a good one for us to do. Let's move to a third and last mentoring tip, because you've been a network executive, you've been a studio executive, you've been a producer, you've sat at a lot of the seats of the grand banquet table of media. You have so much context and so much experience. Is there a third tip that you can give people as they go on their journey?
Yeah, I would say for me, I would persevere and I would show your passion. I think for me, people who are not passionate about this business don't really shouldn't really be in it because it's a really hard business. I would say be your authentic truth. And Adam, I'm forgetting one thing, so you're gonna have to remind me what the last thing is. But I did want to impart that passion really does mean a lot. Um, Thank you for that. I think the last thing that I would recommend you doing is once you get in, is to help pay it forward to others. When I first started in this business, I was one of the only Asian executives in town, and when I found other Asian executives or potential executives, we'd always help each other because we form a network. And when somebody gives you an opportunity, you should want to give somebody else an opportunity because it can only help you going forward. I am working today with a guy, Mike, Adam knows, my boss, Michael Roberts, and he is one of the guys I worked with at Disney many, many years ago. And when he decided to make the move from features to television, I had already done that. He came to me and asked me for guidance on how to transition to television. And when I needed a job, I came to him, and he hired me to work with him. So it's it's a good thing, but it's also a very helpful thing because you never know when paying it forward can pay it forward for you as well. And I think that the more you can do it for people who don't look like you, the broader your community will be. And as we know in this town, it's all about your network and who you know. So the more people you know in more walks of life, from more different pools, the better your career can be.
And I think that uh, paying it forward, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter at what level you are. If you're just starting out, or if you're mid career, if you're later career, you can always pay it forward. Even if you're just starting out, there's always something that you can pay forward to someone else. And giving seems to get a return of 10x in our lives.
Yeah, it's not only a good thing, but it's also, for me, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's also a helpful thing to do. I think a lot of people don't want to help each other in this society, and I think this is a very closed. Hollywood is a very closed world, and I think it's up to us to open it up to everybody, to make it accessible to everybody. It's one of the things I love about MediaU is breaking down the barriers, and paying it forward is a way for you to show your appreciation. And I'm a big believer in karma. Good karma begets more good karma. So as much as I can do it, I do it. I do it. I did it this week. I'm doing it with you guys now. But it's not something that feels like it's a burden. It feels like it's actually a joy because I've had people come back to me and say, "You talked to me 20 years ago, and you changed my life." That's really gratifying to me.
And that is a great place for us to wrap it up today. In the spirit of being accelerated, we've held this even less than 30 minutes, but you're so concise and so clear on what you need to say. It's all we need. For everybody who is here with us today, please join me in thanking Steve. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your mentoring thoughts with everyone. And everyone else, enjoy, pay it forward. Thank you for being a member of the Media U community. And we'll see you again at the next breakthrough with Media U.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much, Adam. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.